Taxation, Part 1, continuation. Okay? So again, there are two purposes of taxation, the revenue raising and the non-revenue. The first one with non-revenue is that is to promote the general welfare of the people. Okay? Number 2 is to strengthen the anemic enterprises or provide incentives to greater production. Number 3, to promote local industries, and the purpose of which is para maprotektahan yung mga local natin. Meaning local is yung mga from Philippines, okay, against those from abroad or foreign competition. Also, it is used as a bargaining tool. Okay. Number 5 is for halt inflation in periods of prosperity to curb spending power. Okay. Number 6, to reduce inequalities in wealth of incomes. Number 7, encourage economic growth through the grant of incentives. Okay. Or pwedeng exemptions also if they are qualified. Okay. Number 8, the taxes may be levied to promote the science and invention or to finance educational activities or to improve the efficiency of local police forces. And lastly, the non-revenue purpose to push for the government's wealth measure. There are three underlying principles behind the power of taxation. Okay? Merong tatlong principles kung bakit merong power of taxation. Number 1 is the principle of necessity. Okay? Accordingly, okay, the existence of the government is a necessity and it cannot continue without means to support itself. Ang ibig sabihin lang nito is hindi mag-i-exist ang isang gobyerno kung walang pambayad or wala itong means to support itself. Kumbaga sa isang tao, hindi mabubuhay ang isang tao kung wala ito pambili ng pagkain or wala tong pagkain. Okay? Wala itong tubig. Kumbaga, ang gobyerno kailangan niya ng taxes, okay, in order for it to exist. It is necessary burden to preserve the state's sovereignty and a means to give the citizenry an army to resist aggression, a navy to defend its shore from invasion, and a corps of civil servants. Mga ganyan. Okay? Another underlying principle is the benefit receive theory. Ano tong benefit receive theory? Okay? Here, the government and the people have the reciprocal obligation or the mutual duties to support and to protect one another. It is also called the symbiotic relationship. Bakit? Here, under the benefit receive theory, okay, the citizenry or the citizens, tayong mga Pilipino, okay, we should support the government by paying the portion. Okay? And that portion will come from our property. Okay? Galing sa bulsa natin. And ito namang gobyerno is it will likewise protect us, okay, by also providing healthcare, education, mga ganyan. So there is the benefit and the receive theory. Last is the lifeblood doctrine. This is very important sa taxation. Bakit lifeblood? Okay? Parang ang dugo sa isang tao. Hindi tayo mabubuhay kung wala tayong dugo. Sa gobyerno naman, parang ganun, not literal na blood. But taxes are considered to be the only means, or it is very taxes are considered to be the lifeblood of the government, without which it cannot exist or nor endure. Okay? So, ang ibig sabihin nito, kung walang pera, the government cannot deliver the services to the people or function, and it can also not serve the people properly. So those are the three underlying principles behind power of taxation. Again, we have the principle of necessity. Number 2, the benefit received theory. And lastly, the lifeblood doctrine. So next, what is the nature or the characteristics or attributes of the power of taxation? Okay, there are 6. First is the taxation is for public purpose. Okay, hindi pwedeng individual or private individuals ang makinabang. Dapat the public or the general. Number 2, it is inherently legislative. Okay? Anong inherently legislative? Remember, there are 3 branches of the government. The legislative, executive, and the judiciary. Ang executive is the administrative or the administration, which is the President of the Philippines. The judiciary, of course, the Supreme Court. Ang legislative body is the law-making body. Okay? Ibig sabihin, sila, they have the power to, they will create laws. Okay? Tax laws in order for them, or that is their duty, gumawa ng mga batas, and one kind or one character of the laws that they can create or they can author, or they can author, is all about taxes. So, ang legislative body lang ang pwedeng gumawa nun. Okay? Number 3, so what is the duty of the executive now? Okay? The executive now will only implement. Okay? They will only implement the taxation, tax laws. Of course, they can also, they also have the power later on to, of course, to sign the law, mga ganyan. That is already discussed naman siguro sa ninyo, sa Constitution. Number 3, or third nature, is that it is subject to international committee or treaty. Number 4, it is an exaction payable in money. So, taxes shall always be in form of money, okay? Pera. Number 5 is it is territorial in nature. And lastly, it is not absolute. Okay? So, hindi to broad and encompassing na dapat na kung gustong i-exercise, dapat na i-exercise. Hindi po ganun ang taxation. It's not a nature or the characteristic of taxation, because taxation is not absolute. Okay? It has constitutional limitations and inherent limitations, which I will discuss later on. Okay? So, remember also that the power to tax is not granted in the Constitution. Okay? Constitutional provisions relating to the power of taxation do not operate as a grant of power of taxation to the government. But, okay, remember, but they serve merely as a limitation or restriction. Bakit po? Kasi, sabi ko nga sa inyo kanina, ang taxation is inherent. Hindi kailangan ng kung ano pa, hindi kailangan nakasulat, okay? Hindi kailangan naka-encode, o hindi kailangan may estatwa ito, ganun. O hindi, walang ganun na requirement. Kumbaga, kailangan yun for its existence. Okay? Kung may gobyerno, andun na yung taxation, power of taxation. So, ang pinoprofit ng Constitution are merely restrictions and limitations. So, hindi nakalagay ang power of taxation sa Constitution. What I mean is, it's not granted by the Constitution. It only provides the limitations or restrictions. So, kailan nagsisimula ang taxation? When does the power of taxation begin? Okay, it commences existence from the moment a state is born with the concurrence of the four elements. Remember in your political law or in your Philippine Constitution, there are four elements of a state. Number one, people. Number two, territory. And number three, sovereignty. And lastly, the government. Okay? So, nagsisimulang taxation pag meron ng when a state is born, of course, with the concurrence of the four elements. Okay? So, always remember that the legislative department, okay, has the inherent power to exercise taxation. Okay? And the local government units, such as the provincial, yung city, yung municipal, and yung mga barangay, okay, through their respective sanggunian. Di ba may mga kanya-kanyang sanggunian yan? And the president, yon, they can exercise the power of taxation, yung mga yan. And always remember na ang presidente ng Pilipinas at itong mga sanggunian ng LGUs, their power to exercise taxation is merely delegated. Remember that word, delegated lang yan. Okay? Pero ang legislative department natin, it's inherent. Meaning, wala silang kailangan. Okay? It is already deep-rooted. It is implicit. It is basic. Okay? It's fundamental on their existence, yung power of taxation. Ang delegated power naman, always remember na it can no longer be delegated, from the principle. Okay? Delegata potestas non potest delegare, or the delegated power can no longer or cannot be further delegated. Ang power of taxation ba is absolute? Kakasabi ko kanina ang sagot, which is, of course, it's not. It's not absolute kasi nga, it is an exercise of the legislative body which is subject to constitutional limitation, inherent limitation, and of course, there's the so-called contractual limitation. So, pag ang isang tax law, okay, is absolute in nature, it is already violating the limitations and the restrictions provided by the law. So, that tax law will be considered null and void. Next, we are done with the characteristics of taxation. Ngayon naman, punta tayo sa characteristics ng taxing power. Okay? Number one, it is comprehensive. Okay? Anong ibig sabihin ng comprehensive? When we say comprehensive, it is something that is very broad. It is wide. Okay? It is diverse. Okay? It is something that is complete. Okay? So, kompleto pag comprehensive. Okay? It covers persons, businesses, activities, professions, rights, and privileges. Another characteristic is that it is unlimited. Okay? Magkaiba yung kanina yung absolute doon sa unlimited. Okay? Here, a tax does not cease to be valid merely because it regulates, discourages, or even definitely deters the activities taxed. The power to impose taxes is one so unlimited in force and so searching in extent that the courts scarcely venture to declare that it is subject to any restrictions whatever, except such as rest in the discretion of the authority which exercises it. Okay? Lastly, it's plenary or complete. As in the case of Republic versus Kagiwa, this is a famous case in taxation, okay? Accordingly, under the NIRC daw, the National Internal Revenue Code, the BIR or the Bureau of Internal Revenue may avail of certain remedies to ensure the collection of taxes. Here, taxes being the lifeblood of the government, okay, should be collected without unnecessary hindrance. Dapat uh, walang mag-stop or there will be no problem, okay, in enforcing the collection, okay, and every precaution must be taken not to unduly suppress it. Lastly, it is supreme. Okay, bakit supreme? Ang ibig sabihin ba nito is sa three inherent powers of the government, yung police power, eminent domain, at saka yung taxation, ang pinaka mataas ay ang taxation. Okay? Ang sabi dito, okay, sabi ng batas natin, it is supreme in so far as the selection of the subject of taxation is concerned. But it does not mean that it is the superior to other inherent powers of the state. Kasi nga po ang taxation, ang eminent domain, at ang police power are equal in nature. Okay, we now go with characteristics of tax naman. We are done with the characteristics or nature of taxation, characteristics of taxing power, and we now go with the characteristics of tax. Tax naman tayo. Okay? A tax is an enforced contribution. Nasabi ko na yun sa inyo kanina. Sa pilitang pagko-contribute. Okay? Sa pilitan, hindi. Kasi nga, kailangan ng gobyerno yan para maprotektahan ka rin. Okay? Here, we also have the tax imposed must be proportionate in character. Anong ibig sabihin ng proportionate? Okay? When we say proportionate, it must correspond in the amount or your ability to pay. Okay? It must be equivalent. It must be prorated. Okay? It must be commensurable to your ability to pay. So, kung example, ang doktor, syempre malaki ang sahod ng mga doktor, mas mataas din yung tax na i-impose sa kanila. Kung mababa ang sahod mo, for example, isa kang job order sa gobyerno at ang sahod mo nasa 10,000 compared sa doktor nasa 100,000, of course, mas maliit yung taxes mo compared sa doktor na mataas ang sinasahod. Okay? There is this so-called rule in taxation, okay? The uniformity and that the rule of taxation shall always be uniform and equitable. The Congress shall evolve a progressive system of taxation. Number 3, it must be levied for public purpose only. Okay? In here, the revenues derived from taxes cannot be used for purely private purposes or for exclusive benefit of private persons. For example, nagbabayad ka ng tax. Okay? Nagbabayad ka ngayon ng tax. Tapos, nalaman mo na yung tax na ito pala is ginamit ng isang Chinese na tao. Okay? Instead na mapunta sa bulsa ng gobyerno, napunta to sa bulsa ng isang private individuals. In that case, it's no longer levied for public purpose. Okay? And remember, it is public, meaning hindi dapat, or when we say public purpose, must be general. Okay? In general. Pwede bang magkinabang ang isang Chinese? Okay, pwede naman kung as long as he is paying the taxes. Okay, for example, kumikita siya sa Pilipinas, we have this so-called income tax, di ba? May matatax na impose dun sa income that he generated sa within the Philippines. Mga ganun. So, pwede rin siyang maprotektan using our taxes. Okay? Number 4, it is generally payable in the form of money, meaning, nababayaran, ang pagbabayad ng taxes is in the form of money. Pwede bang hindi po in the form of money? Pwede naman. Example, yung mga back pay certificates under RA number 304. Okay, as amended. Always remember also that taxes is personal to the taxpayer. Hindi niya pwedeng ipasa sa ibang tao. Okay? Number 6. It is levied on persons, properties, rights, acts, privileges, or transactions. Meaning, these persons, properties, okay, rights, acts, these transactions, privileges, okay, these are the objects or the subjects of taxation. Number 7, it is levied by the state which has jurisdiction or control over the subject to be taxed. Okay? It is the state which has the jurisdiction or control. Number 8, it is levied by the lawmaking body. Na-explain ko na sa inyo kanina. Okay? So, what are the difference between the taxation, eminent domain, and the police power? As I discussed a while ago, okay, there are 3 inherent powers of the government. The taxation, the eminent domain, and the police power. Itong police power na to, hindi porke police, nasa Philippine National Police na, hindi po. Okay? Sa gobyerno ito, gobyerno. Kung sinong gobyerno, anything that has police, that is bestowed with police power. Okay? So first, as to the authority or who can exercise the power. In taxation, it is always or it can be exercised by the government or its political subdivisions. As I mentioned, what are these political subdivisions? The local government units through the sanggunians of the city, the municipality, the barangay, okay? So, yan. And of course, the President of the Philippines. Sa eminent domain naman, sinong nagpa-practice nito? Sinong pwede? It is of course exercised by the government, yung political subdivisions, and it can also be granted to some public service companies or public utilities such as yung mga water district natin, mga electric companies. Pwede sila. Of course, subject to the limitations or guidelines set by the government. Next is tong police power. Sino ba ito, ma'am? Hindi po yung Philippine National Police. Hindi po yon. Okay? It may be exercised only by the government or its political subdivisions. You will know later on what is police power as we go sa ating discussion. Para saan ang taxation? What is the purpose of taxation? Again, there's this so-called revenue and the non-revenue purpose na discuss natin kanina. How about eminent domain? Ano bang purpose nito? It is to facilitate the taking of private property for public use. Sa eminent domain po, meron tayong sapilitang kinukuhang private property. At itong private property na to, i-convert into public use. Okay? For example, si Pedro, meron siyang lupa. Itong lupa na to is kailangan para mag-extend or mag-road widening ang gobyerno. Ngayon, itong private property na to, since kailangan ng gobyerno, okay, at magiging public use siya, kailangan bayaran naman siya ng gobyerno. Okay? The government will be paying the owner of the property, which this property will be converted into public use. Paano naman ang police power? Okay? Ang police power, for example lang, okay? Ang may mga lupa na kailangan na talaga ng gobyerno na pwede, okay? Na pwedeng hindi sila mabayaran. Okay? Walang monetary value. In here, the use of the property is regulated for the purpose of promoting the general welfare and it is not compensable. Okay, walang bayad. Next.